I'm really glad that he asked me to share. GCC is something that's been really close to my heart. The anniversary and just the timeliness of him asking me to have a testimony is actually coming at a really timely point in my life. I've called Korea home for about 5 years now. And next month I'll actually be leaving Korea because God has called me to be elsewhere. Korea has been a healing time for me, and GCC has been a big part of that process. So earlier this week, Pastor Joel actually reminded me of a short video clip because he asked us all to do a short one the first year that we had our birthday. And he reminded me that I said, if it wasn't for GCC, I probably wouldn't be at church at all. It's hard to believe that that was only about 4 years ago. You see, I came to Korea to run away from my life back home. I wanted to run away from my community, my church, Christianity, just in general. But deep down, my hope was that God would pursue me and that I would somehow come running back to him. To give you a quick background on my life, I grew up in a Christian family. Both my parents were worship leaders and elders at the church, so I was pretty much similar to like a pastor's kid. I spent all my Sundays pining after his word, immersing myself in worship songs, and I just loved getting to know who God and who he was. A couple of years after college, however, I became close friends with a toxic girl that has started helping out with worship at my parents' church. The closer we became friends, the more my reality of God started to shift. She had unhealthy perceptions of God that were not gospel-centered. So soon I started doubting that the Bible was really true or accurate, and I started believing that God possibly didn't even exist at all. A year or so later, she got kicked out of the church, but even though she was gone, all my doubts still remained. I attempted to ask church leaders for help, but I was always met with the same response, that Christians should never doubt God's existence, that those who do are backsliders, and that they should be condemned. I was left feeling hurt, alone, confused, and no one in church, including my parents, wanted to help or was willing to help. I wanted to run away from everything and everyone. So when the opportunity to teach in Korea came up, I quickly leapt at the chance. Deep down in my heart, I knew that this move would somehow help restore my relationship with him. But traveling to the other side of the world wasn't an easy fix. Surprise, my issues still followed me. Korea was extremely challenging the first year or so. I was still lonely, hurt, and confused from things back home. On top of it, I had a verbally abusive work environment. I spent most nights crying out and cursing God, wondering if things would ever actually improve. Looking back, I can see now how that was a necessary time in my life, but at the time I was just feeling really alone. I still dragged my feet to church though. It's an easy place to find some community, and I honestly didn't want to go, but I knew that if I didn't force myself, then I would probably turn completely away from God. Deep down, I didn't really want that to happen. So I went to a couple of churches in Seoul, but was having a difficult time connecting with a church community. I'm sure anybody who has church shopped before kind of knows that same feeling. All I wanted really was a safe place to heal. Some of the churches reminded me of my parents' church. Others seemed kind of to be full of people trying to act perfect. None of them really seemed like a safe place where I could share my doubts. Nonetheless, I went. I'd sit alone. I would judge all the lyrics to all the songs. I would judge even the message being said, and in my mind being like, oh, that's not true. But something always happened there was always a portion of the lyrics or message that would just penetrate my heart. And I would just sit there left sobbing uncontrollably. And not even necessarily not knowing why, but knowing that my heart just ached for him. But unfortunately, nobody was really there to offer an ear. I'd sit next to someone, and because I was new and I was crying, nobody would offer a tissue, ask me if I was okay, and I would just leave church again. So this was about the time that Gospel City was launching, and my friend Andrew Cole, which some of you know, was part of the launch team. I had served with him in InterVarsity on campus back in the States, so I knew that any community he was a part of was probably really biblically grounded. So, as one last attempt at church, I decided to go. It was the second to last Sunday that was held at the school, and Pastor Joel was just beginning his Luke series. So, as you know, it's been going on for 4 years, and it will probably be going on for a lot longer. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I specifically remember him acknowledging that everybody doubts from time to time. And I was floored. I had never heard a pastor talk about doubt before, let alone in a non-condemning way. I was still a little skeptical, but I remembered thinking that this church could potentially be a safe place for me to work through things. So I stayed. A couple months in, I got the chance to sit down with Pastor Joel. As we got to know each other, he shared about an opportunity to serve the church doing slides. It was just a simple gesture and the meeting, but looking back, I think it was a critical point in my recovery. It had been years since a pastor sat down with me and asked about my life, or even had asked for my help. I felt like an asset despite my brokenness. As the months went by, I began to slowly heal. God didn't seem so distant and foreign anymore. Having sermons that were grounded in the gospel and scripture helped me slowly clear up the doubts that had plagued my mind for so long. Simple short series, like he did a Ruth series about love, or he did a whole backstory just about the gospel. Those little things just helped me get more grounded and firm in who God was again. He continued to restore every aspect of my life. He blessed me with healthy friendships, like Gary, who was one of the first people who ever talked to me, Han, who's been through everything, all the ups and downs, and everybody that I've been serving with here. He even restored my passion for worship. In fact, he not only restored it, but grew up and I became a worship leader. And it's a process where a lot of grace has been given from everyone. Last week, I sat down for a quiet time and I ended up writing some song lyrics. And they say, I will spend all of my days worshiping you, praising you for who you are. 5 years ago, I couldn't have imagined ever believing or singing those words. But God, in all his sovereignty, patiently pursued me and placed me exactly where I needed to be at the appropriate times. I'm moving back to the States now, more grounded in the gospel and the knowledge of God. And I'm even in the midst of applying to be a missionary in Cambodia. He could have used any church community in Korea, but I'm beyond grateful that he chose GCC to help me heal. GCC is not perfect. It's a church full of broken but gracious people. This church has gone through many changes and challenges. We have had some growing pains and some disagreements. But one thing always remains the same, that our devotion to God, the gospel, and to people. So I encourage you to dig deeper into this community. For some of you that might be stepping up to volunteer in a ministry, the worship team's always needing help, so you can come join. For others, it might just be finding the courage to open up to someone about your doubts and struggles. And if that's you, please talk to somebody. Leaders and members of your GCs or your CGs are great places to turn to, and they're always there willing to listen. This year's theme, as you know, is devotion. And my prayer is that this community continues to grow in their devotion to God and to each other. Thank you.